Hello, Vrushali. Hi.
It's been a long, I have not given lots of updates about my project
Okay.
as exam was there, and now I'm free, like totally. So work upon the project. Uh, the thing was, I was last time working upon the animation and the UI part. That was completed. So now I will look upon the other areas.
Okay. That sounds good. Have you given more thought to the documentation? Are you working on that?
Documentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I look at your references, so checking the things and placing it together.
All right. Yeah. So, yeah, the deadline for the extension is October 23rd, I think. So you have about maybe 5 weeks. Yeah, it's 5 weeks.
Yeah, I will. I will do it.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah. I just want to make you, I always like to keep the time frame in mind for people so they,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's good. All right. Yeah, I look forward to seeing maybe next week an update. Like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I will show. Like it's been a long time. I have also not doing it, so I don't have anything to show right now. But yeah, next week probably I will have lots of things in
Oh,
place.
okay, that sounds good. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. There's Raj. Hello. How are you? That's okay. Do you have an update? I don't know if you can talk. Okay.
Yeah. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll share my screen.
Okay.
So I got started with making the demo part. So I went through MESA's documentation and I made a very basic demo. So this is just there is one agent and who is there in this one particular environment or model, and then all that's happening is he's being placed in a random coordinate, and I'm running this for first there are initially 100 agents, and the width and height of that environment is 10. So what it's doing is it creates the agents, and then this is just adding them to a random coordinate that is in the range of the width and height, and just placing them accordingly. And then there is this data collector mod MESA, which helps us to record the data while the simulations are happening. So we can have the various graphs and other readings with that. And this is the basic demo that it's how it's looking in the Jupyter notebook. The issue right now is if I try to run this in a web interface, it will work. The issue is when this runs on a web interface, let's say I just change a simple value, like if I change this 50 to 100, so what will happen is I'll have to restart this entire kernel, and it takes a lot of time, and the development process becomes a bit slower. So right now I'm working in the Jupyter notebook itself, and once the model is finalized, I'll move it to the web part. I don't think that will take much time.
No.
I'm still audible, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, and this is what I was planning. So let's say now this is number of agents. This can be changed to something like number of contributors. So you can just set this to how much ever you want. So let's say I just set it to 33, let's say. I can just start the simulation, and then all this happens. You have the data that's being recorded, and then the stuff happening. The only issue with this is, let's say that you have it if the blue one is a contributor, and you want to say that if a contributor becomes, if a contributor boosts his health or competence factor, and you want him to change to, let's say the color green or red, so that logic has to be separately written in the visualization part always. That can't be integrated in the logic over here, and we expect it to be run itself. So every time that some new logic is incorporated, it has to be incorporated in the code as well as in the visualization part of it. So that is one thing. But I think this is how sort of the final model may look like. I'll still have to add a few more sliders and then a few more parameters that we need to record. And as our discussion earlier, how we had decided that every contributor will have a property like, let's say, health, that if he solves a level 1 sort of issue, then his health is decreased by 2 or 3 points, basically just to show that he is spending his energy and all that. So I need to make a component for a graph so that the health part can be rendered here below. This one came out of the box as I made the model. This was MESA's inbuilt one. But for portraying agents' health, I have to make a custom graph component for that. I'm reading its documentation now, so I'll be working on that as well. And apart from that, I also tried looking a bit into the website. The issue with that is, I think I was using, there is a library called NextAuth, which I was using to do the GitHub authentication.
Okay.
But now I'm having a feeling that it may not be the best option. So I'll try moving that to some other authentication provider. That should also be done in this week.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's my update.
Yeah, that's good. We had a little bit of a problem with authentication last fall, I think, when we were working on this. So this is, this is the harder part of the project, I guess.
It's a bit tricky.
Yeah. That interface that you showed, could you reshare that? I wanted to see some things on that. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
So this is like just a standard interface. Money model is just like a arbitrary thing. You can change that. Number of agents can be number of contributors. And so this graph here, what is this going to show? This is the Gini coefficient versus time, but could you just replace that with any parameter?
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe we can have a histogram. So let's say there are 100 or 20 contributors, for example. So there can be a histogram that represents the health of every contributor. And then if the overall, like what you said, if overall the project is going well, then that may be depicted by this graph. That is the idea I have as of now.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Having a distribution that we can then, can you output the contents of that graph into like a CSV file, or is that something that just gets plotted?
I think I can do that.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into it a bit, but I think I can get it done.
Yeah, because that's always the thing. Like the graph shows it, shows you this dynamic update of the state of things, but then you can't analyze it later, and that's kind of the thing we want to do more too. At least have like a output where we can, we could download and analyze it, or later we could have like an online analysis as well. But just to have a format where it can be dumped and then worked from.
Yeah, I think I can get that then.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, well, thanks for that update. That looks pretty good. Yeah. So welcome, Morgan and Jesse. Jesse, how are you?
Good. I'll say more in a few minutes.
Okay. How are you, Morgan? Probably driving. So, yeah, morning. So I guess I can let Jesse get ready. I can present on something that happened recently in the Slack and in the community of VR and XR. So let me share my screen. So we had it was sort of a kind of a thing that happened this week. So this was this week. Hussain, who's been working on VR related things, and he is on the Slack, and this is in the virtual reality and neuro sim channel, or neuro, yeah. And he said, has the Unity news reached this lab? For those of you unaware, Unity is adding extra fees onto developers for a variety of actions, notably the active end users installing a Unity game. If a game reaches a certain threshold, 200,000 dollars for the free Unity tier. They measure this in downloads and like revenue, which sounds high, but it isn't for a studio. That game will then start incurring fees every time a user installs it. So this is where if you build something on Unity and it's a popular application, and you get to a certain revenue threshold or download threshold, I'm not really sure how they work, but basically then a fee is incurred. And then Hussain says, not sure if it affects my research going on, but just wanted to share. So does it affect our lab, basically, he was asking. And we're not really I don't think it really affects us at all. But the lesson here, of course, is to use an open standard for XR development. And then apparently Unity has a history of not treating its users or developers with a lot of, let's just say it's not necessarily viewed as a fair partnership. So I brought a couple of references together on this. So the first one is Unity pricing update explained, concerns about per install fees plus required internet connection for personal plan. So this is from Game World Observer. There's been a lot of misinterpretation of this online. So people see that Unity is going to have a new pricing structure, and people are we have to, we don't really want to clarify what's going on. We want to panic. On the other hand, Unity's been very opaque about its intentions. So there have been some communications out of the company that have been odd. They've been inconsistent. So that never helps. So Unity has announced an update to its pricing policy. Here is a breakdown of all the changes, including the biggest one, the so-called runtime fee, charged for every install after a game crosses certain thresholds. So this is, will Unity now charge developers for every install of their games? So they have this page that details changes to its plans and prices, including the new runtime fee model. The changes will take effect January 1, 2024. The runtime fee is applied if certain products meet two criteria. The first is the minimum revenue threshold in the last 12 months and a minimum lifetime install count. Fees depend on the type of Unity plan the developer is using. So for Personal and Unity Plus, it's $200K in terms of 12-month revenue and $200K lifetime installs for each game, not the entire portfolio, so that's important. So that limits it to, certain really popular applications. So that doesn't really impact maybe 90% of the things that are developed. But, it does drive home this lesson of if you adopt a tool for development, sometimes you're going to have to make contingency plans if they change their terms of use. Now, we've had that problem with Slack. Slack used to be, I guess it was it would allow you to access messages for infinitely, and then they changed it to 3 months, and then they changed it to the last 10,000 messages, and then they changed it to 3 months of where you can go back 3 months in any channel and look at the messages. So these changes are going to affect how you can use the tool. So when you adopt a tool, you can't predict what the constraints on the tool will be in 2 or 3 years, but you can, make a better or worse decision. Typically, the open source tools are have less constraints, but that's not always the case. Sometimes open source tools, notably the Red Hat debacle that happened a couple months ago now, where Red Hat decided to close up their ecosystem for certain applications, and it caused sort of a stir in the open source community there. So, licensing terms can change, terms of use can change. So you have to be careful, and you have to have a contingency plan to plan around that. And so for Unity Pro and Enterprise licenses, $1 million in revenue and 1 million installs is the threshold. So it seems like, if you have a higher level or a higher tier license, you have a higher threshold. Fees will be charged monthly. the changes will affect most devs using the Unity Personal and Plus plans, as they will have to pay 20 cents for every install above the 200K threshold. So yeah, this is the details of this, why they're introducing these. The company says its engine consists of two software products, the Unity Editor and Unity Runtime. The latter is code that runs on player devices and helps players scale their games, so it believes it's reasonable to charge additional fees for the use of the runtime. So a lot of times when these products are introduced, they don't have the challenges of that they do when they scale up. So when you have no users, you can say, well, we're going to run everything for free. If you have like an affordable license, but then if we get to a point where we're running so much, so many things in the cloud, we have to start charging for those things. So it's, sometimes it's a practical concern by the company what their needs are when they scale up their operations. Sometimes they just want to grab some of the revenue, so this is one case for sort of an open source strategy for, different tools that you might use, having your tool stack that you're going to use. But you never know. So we chose this because each time a game is downloaded, the Unity runtime is also installed. Also, we believe that an initial install-based fee allows creators to keep the ongoing financial gains for player engagement, unlike a revenue share. So this is where we have this. They're able to take those additional resources and put them back into continued investment in the code that runs Unity. So that's what they're trying to do here. They really want to, but really the main thing here is to count installs correctly so that, you don't have people who, where they're installs that aren't really installs. So there's this thing called install bombing, which I've never heard of before. So, but apparently, when you count installs, like you count any sort of user statistic, and this goes for, our open source sustainability as well. Sometimes we collect statistics that are sort of pseudo statistics. In other words, we use a counter in like a website counter or something for hits, and it's like some bot or something hitting the website continuously, or it's someone who gets there like for a second and bounces back out. So there are a lot of like things that aren't really use, but it's like counted as use. So Unity will only charge for an initial installation, so reinstalls don't count. Fee will be applied if the same user installs the game on a second device. Charity games will be free of charge. Unity doesn't receive end player information, just aggregate data. So when you make these kind of counts for use, it's important to know what you're measuring. It's important to know how it's measured. And so that's, I'll put these in the Slack so you can get a sense of what's going on in this debate. Now, needless to say, this enraged the game development community, very vocal. And so there was a lot of, this is basically says it all, this image here. This is something where you build a tool, you put it out into the world, people start to adopt it, and you start to build goodwill with your developers, and then you have to maintain that goodwill. And sometimes when you make decisions like this, you can destroy that goodwill, or you can upend that goodwill in unintended ways. So this is something that you have to deal with in open source development. If you're developing a tool, you want to maintain goodwill. Some of that comes from good communication with your user base. Some of that is just like, if you make an unpopular decision, well, that's going to just be a problem no matter what. So it's really hard to, you really have to manage this well. You really have to be aware of what the user base is thinking, what they want, or what they find to be fair or not. And, maybe this is fair in a lot of ways, but that's not that's not the sentiment apparently. So this just kind of goes through this again, the details of this. They kind of talk about some of the, So here's a quote from Unity CEO John Riccitiello. There's no royalties, no fucking around. When rolling out the free personal tier in 2015, we're not nickel and diming people. We're not charging them a royalty when we say it's free, it's free. And so that's in 2015, but of course things change. And so that, there's this ethic of free and open in open source and in software more generally. But this just goes to show you some of these dynamics. This is a post from Reddit, a deep dive in why Unity's new install-based pricing model is fundamentally broken and why there is no practical way they can estimate install counts. So again, we have this estimate of install counts. It's a measure that we have to be precise on if we're going to make decisions on it, or even if we want to really have a good handle on what our community is doing and what how to evaluate our software. So there's no practical way they can estimate install counts without leaving developers open to huge amounts of financial risk due to piracy and abuse. So this is a different issue, kind of, where people pirate your software and people install the pirated versions. This is where if they don't make a distinction between the pirated versions and your version, you could be both losing money on the pirated versions and having to pay for installs that aren't really of your. You're not getting any benefit out of those installs. So it's a lose-lose. And so this is a problem too, where, if you track installs, if you're going to make a policy like this and track installs, you better know exactly what the installs are without some of these edge cases coming into play. So this is a typical Reddit post, I imagine, and it kind of goes through some of this discussion. So this might be, someone says, it's all so horribly unpredictable and vague. So, this is another thing. You really have to be clear when you tell your users something and you change policies. Now, there's some other things I wanted to talk about. I said that, there are these open source alternatives, or when you build your technology stack for your open source endeavors, that you want to sort of both kind of build on open source, but also have contingency plans for if the tools you're using get, deprecated, or if the rules change and it isn't too disruptive to your technology stack, and then putting out the thing that you want to put out. So this is Microsoft Mixed Reality Toolkit 3. This is a toolkit that a couple of MRTK3, which a couple of companies have backed the sort of sustainability of. So this is where Microsoft builds HoloLens, which is a device. It's an augmented reality device. They've been developing this, and a lot of these tools, or these toolkits, the open source ones anyways, rely on the sort of the goodwill of companies that maybe, if they invest in it, they can foster development and things like that. Now, the Mixed Reality Toolkit has been backed by not only by Microsoft, but by Magic Leap and a couple other companies that are sort of sponsoring its development. So this is the Mixed Reality Toolkit. This is where it's built on top of Unity's XR management system and XR interaction toolkit. So there is a component of Unity here, which might be a problem for continued development, because they built a product on top of Unity. And so now, you have those, I guess you have those same constraints. I'm not really sure. I don't think anyone knows right now. But this is, something that's been built on top of Unity, but it is being backed by the community. So we'll have to see if they're up, if that becomes a problem, if there are ways around that. So, definitely if you build on top of something, there's this option of picking the Unreal Engine as an alternative. So someone asked a question, super nice, does the MRTK, will it also be available for Unreal? And if so, which version will be supported? So, you have tools like this that are built on top of Unity. You could maybe replace Unity with Unreal if you need to. But these kind of tool standards are backed by a number of companies. So they have an invested interest in keeping it from being upended. And then, of course, there are these the top 5 free and open source game engines you should try. So because of continuous technological innovation, upgradation gaming has become popular. Here are the top 5 free and open source game engines you should try out. So this is talking about game engines, which Unity is, of course, one. There's the Unreal Engine. And a game engine is really just for generating like game physics, functionality, rendering 2 and 3D graphics. So you'll have a lot of the things you can create objects, and then you want to put them in a world. So this is why we want to have a game engine. And then there are a number of open source game engines. The main benefit of an open source game engine as opposed to something like Unity is the free license. So, you always want to pay attention to the license you're using and the terms that you're using if it's not open source. While using the proprietary gaming software, sometimes getting a license becomes a big headache. Open source can be a resolution because completely open source platforms don't require any kind of license. So this isn't exactly true. There's an open source license, but it's not a paid license, a paid seat. So, we want to have these kind of engines available to people without too much constraint. So the best open source game engine, according to them, and I've heard this from looking around on the internet, is Godot. So this is the Godot game engine. I've not tried this, so I don't know how it works, but they released with a mission to provide an open source solution, which is considered to be one of the most powerful 2 and 3D cross-platform game development engines. It is completely free and open source under the very permissive MIT license. So the MIT license is usually like fair use and open use, and there's, I think, just the limit of attribution is the only thing. So you can do whatever you want with it. There are no charges, or and so this kind of talks about Godot and its history. So that's one. Then there's Cocos 2DX, which is something that is another game engine. Its core is written in C++ and supports development in C++, Lua, and it's also under the MIT license. This is something you can use for mobile as well. So, people use Cocos for mobile, and that allows you to do more with that. There's CryEngine, which is another game engine type. It is made mostly from C++ and Python. Armory, which is a popular choice amongst indie game developers. It works with Blender, so Blender integration is good to have. A lot of people use Blender for creating assets. There's OpenEdge, and that's the last one, which has So this actually is. So this is. OpenEdge is very popular for the games developed by this engine, like the Age of Empires 1 and 2, and Star Wars Galactic Backgrounds. So that's all. So that's all I have for that. I see people are posting a lot of comments in here. And Hussein's here. Hello, Hussain.
Hi.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So let's look at the comments, and I want to hear from Hussain because, Vrushali said that's bad about the Unity situation, and then Hussain says we're super angry. You saw the explosion in the one article I was reading off. Not sure if Bradley mentioned this, but the CEO has a history of doing this. We saw that.
He previously was at EA, and that's why people hate EA. And are you familiar? Like EA just makes so many terrible decisions. Like I'm talking about the video game company.
Yes.
They make FIFA. They make like a bunch of sports games and things like that, and involving microtransactions, and that's why everybody hates them. So yeah.
Yeah, so that brings to mind about 10 years ago the whole SimCity debacle. I don't know if people were familiar with that, but they released the version of SimCity, I think in 2013, 2012, where they had a new version of SimCity and everyone was really excited because they hadn't released one in a while. And they released it and they decided that they made a bunch of bad decisions, but one was to host it on the cloud. So if you tried to access it, a lot of people were not able to access the game. They were not able to save the game properly, and basically it resulted in the the EA studio in Emeryville, California, to close because they were kind of that development team was singled out and said, "Well, you fucked up, you're." So that was the those are kind of decisions that can really be painful for a lot of people, especially if you have this user community that's really passionate, and of course they're invested in these things, So that's not sure, Bradley. Yeah, we talked about that. Vrushali says Godot is a little similar to Unity. Yes, they're very similar in terms of their layout, and so yeah, that might be an option too. And you don't need to wait. Godot OS is ready now. Yeah. So these are all available now. You can just use them. Because the problem is switching over, when you have an organization, and we don't really have a lot of deeply invested standards. But if you were deeply invested in something, like if you built a game and you had multiple versions of it, switching over to a new engine may or may not be a very trivial thing. It could be very difficult to actually maintain the quality that you have and maintain the sort of the all the features of the game that you have. So it may be a matter of, it may be very easy. If it's similar, if one tool is similar to another, it's usually pretty easy. But if you have a lot of specialized features, then that may be a problem. So again, this is something, if you're planning an open source project, especially with development, using a lot of tools underneath, you need to think about this. Like, what are our contingency plans? If things break, if things go south with some tool, how do we replace it without disrupting our product? So it's really, really good stuff. Jesse has, I don't know what this icon is, but it's like someone with a headache or ice pack on their head.
It is a salute to Morgan's waiting for Godot joke, is what it is.
Yeah, it was the waiting for the Godot joke. Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to play off with that. I'm like, yep, I understood the reference.
Yeah, waiting for Godot to surpass Unity in use, and then Morgan said ogre. And that's, I guess, what is ogre? Another game engine. Okay, yeah. All right, yeah. So that's good. I don't know anything about ogre though, obviously. So that's all I have on that. I thought that was a nice thing to bring up because it's very timely. So, Hussain, would you like to give an update?
Hi, thanks, and excuse me for coming in a bit late. Sure. So, thank you for sharing, Bradley. This has been very informative. Yes, the Unity changes are pretty important, considering how extremely widely used Unity is. I think, and like with maybe like 50 or 60% of games that you find nowadays are being made in Unity. I think it might be as high as that. But yeah, I've just been chatting with other people within the XR and game development community, like about their thoughts, whether they want to switch over to something else. Like, I'm already starting to get more into Unreal anyways. And I know there are many, many people and groups and places that are now making petitions and stuff like that to, just take a stand and say like this isn't cool and we just can't deal with that. So, I mean, whatever happens. At this point, at least for me, I'm just trying to be more agile and nimble. So I see this happening with Unity, and I think to myself like, okay, so I might start to broaden my horizons, maybe branch out into other engines and other sorts of things too. So that's just my take on things right now. Sometimes just best to be like agnostic and just do what you can do. Yeah. And then maybe Apple's decision not to have a Unity SDK for OS won't hurt them so much. Okay. So anyways, thank you. Thanks for sharing. So I've been doing a bit of work on a dashboard for scientists. So basically, I want to get some practice in making a Vision OS Pro app that scientists and researchers could use. So let me see if I can share can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I should be able to. Okay, here we go. Okay, you can all see this. Okay.
Yeah.
I just have some basic stuff in place to create some sort of menu with content in a dashboard, like a simple hello world that you can visualize with Vision OS Pro. So this preview just shows you what it would look like when you place the Apple headset on in front of you. And because I'm pretty new at Swift, so Swift is the programming language that Apple uses. I'm pretty new at Swift. It's taking me a bit to learn to get this together, but I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can get together. So this is part of a project that I'm just working on, kind of just for fun, but it is for my portfolio and repositories and things. I wanted to make a tool or something that scientists and researchers themselves could use in basically aiding their research in some way possible, like to either visualize data using graphs, to help them take notes about things, to observe, say, images or data in some ways, and because we want to see what scientists can use with Vision OS as well. So, yeah. Okay, so that's all I wanted to share, and this is just something I'm doing in my spare time outside of my career, and that's basically all it is.
So I have a question. Well, could you bring it back up? I have a few questions about it. So what do you envision this, like, what is this, like, how would this work if you had populated it with content? So I see the sidebar and content, and then it's like this thing in the middle of the room. So what are they doing there?
I was thinking one of those really, really futuristic user interfaces that you see from like Iron Man or something. Like when Tony Stark is talking to Jarvis and he can visualize everything he needs of his costume in the screen in front of him. But as of now, I'm going to start with just being able to visualize or display data and show some charts or graphs, given some input information, and start with something basic and simple like that. So, even if it's something like looking at like a map, looking at like some graphs, some charts, some things, or right now I think I'm going to try to keep it a bit general purpose in some ways, like even if it's just a general like note-taking sort of thing. But you can definitely be more specialized. I guess if I were like working in a, cognitive science lab, and we were observing physiological responses to different stimuli as part of a wider experiment, then perhaps you could make things more specific. But I just wanted to get some basic stuff in place, like the sidebar, the content, and you can add items. Like I think I can change this right now, like text item, and something else. My computer always gets a bit slow when I'm loading the GSoC too. But oops. All right, so yeah. I won't mess around with that just yet, but there it is. That's essentially how you do it.
Oh wow.
And ideally we can also expand this so that it can become more multifaceted, multidimensional, like being able to look at different screens in the room around you, and maybe even make it a bit fun, a bit more of a futuristic interface too. I always got to imagine futuristic sci-fi sort of scenarios and that stuff. And I always like to imagine like the scenes from like Iron Man and the Avengers, and Tony Stark can just walk into his room and talk to Jarvis, his AI, and just visualize what he needs to do on the screen in front of him. So, but yeah, it is what it is. I'm trying to take it from a methodical utility perspective, like as a scientist, as a researcher, but also put some elements of design and graphics and aesthetics into it too. So.
Oh yeah, I know. So I've been playing around with this idea of having like a reader or a paper reader, like in MetaQuest, and there are a couple of readers that they have, and they're not really kind of what I wanted. I was thinking of having an immersive reader, so you pull up a PDF, you could move it around, you could have you could scroll through it. So it's kind of hard because usually you have your reader in your hand and you're going through it with your thumbs, but in this case it would be it would come up and you could do other things while you have your reader up, like take notes. And they have some people have built reader apps, but they're not very good. Conceptually they're sort of not quite there. So I mean, this is good for manipulating data, but also just reading stuff and having other screens up. So if you had a screen where you had your PDF. You could have another screen where you had your notes. You could take notes. You have maybe your desktop up. You can kind of do this in Immersed, which is an application like where you can project screens. But that's not exactly what I was thinking either. There's got to be some sort of magic solution where it's really kind of has a good feel and like you can do things and it's seamless. But I'm not sure exactly what the design looks like.
I mean, for the most part, and well, we don't have the headsets in front of us, so we can't actually say. But for the most part, these what people have been creating with the Vision OS Pro has been, people are definitely emphasizing like simplicity, elegance, like obviously like Apple's sort of standard way of doing things over, say, how other companies would do similar stuff, and like it's crazy because like even getting onto this stuff now, like a year before the headset comes out, people have already been doing stuff. Like one of my friends got invited to Apple to their developer lab when he showed him his Vision OS prototype app that he created. So people are launching stuff out of things like this. So, and the best part is there's no installation microtransaction on anything. Anyway, okay, yeah, but anyways, like I guess it's interesting because when you ask scientists, because one of the best ways to approach this is to like ask scientists and researchers themselves, like, what do you need for your work? What would really help you? And everybody's going to tell you different things. Like back when I worked in bioinformatics, there was just such a shortage of like really efficient software, for example, and but it was so complicated because a lot of the specific issues different bioinformaticians would face were pretty specific to each problem, to each project, and what was going on. So but I do really appreciate what Bradley told me, like a PDF reader, like some documents right there in front of you. That'd be really, really, really ideal. And then, some of the typical stuff you see like on like iPads and stuff, it's all right, but excuse me, reading using spatial computing, that can be pretty essential and pretty useful for scientists. So
yeah. And then there's always a thing about like projecting your desktop into a space like that versus running it natively on the device. And I think probably for a lot of data analysis, it would be like you'd run it on a computer somewhere else and then project it into that environment. So the computational load would be out on the machine out there. And then your device, which runs on a battery, you wouldn't have to drain it as much, and because that's a concern. But yeah, I think something like having readers and having like data analysis capabilities, and like being able to visualize like different things like data points, or we were talking about different anatomical models. That's what Vrushali's working on. Those would all be like really parts of that. I just don't know. Like I think the key is getting it all like in the space, so like you can reference multiple things at once and say, okay, I can understand this problem. I could read a little bit out of this paper, manipulate a virtual model, look at some data, and then put it all together. That would be really cool. I just at least for me.
Yeah, and maybe even giving presentations in spatial computing space too. So I guess one maybe bottleneck people would anticipate is like, well, I can already visualize all the data I need on my computers right now. Why would I go through all this effort of doing it in a spatial computing space if I'm already fine with doing what I'm doing right now?
Yeah.
So I guess it's also important to emphasize something that gives you a bit of an edge, like to give you some sort of advantage and share and explain to people like you want to embrace Vision OS Pro headset for research in particular, because being able to visualize the human embryo right there in front of you is far more effective than just using Blender or Unity or something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, but that's where I'm coming from. That's where things are going, and
well, that's fascinating. Yeah, it'd be kind of cool. I don't know if you want to put up like a survey, like an informal survey on the web. It'd be kind of interesting to. Like, or just ask people what kinds of things did you like to see in an interface and see what people say, or I don't know how you would do that. Like you would ask questions, or just to get a sense of what people. I don't
What
know.
people are looking for.
Yeah. I mean, scientists. Yeah. So you go to science
Yeah,
Twitter, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And they don't even have to do it in the lab too. They can do it in they can visualize things in their living room, in their home office, and yeah. We'll see what the potential is. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's great. That looks great. Any questions from?
Any other questions?
Well, none right now, but yeah, Vrushali says it's cool. So thank you, Hussain. That's great. So Jesse.
Hey, yeah, I don't have a lot to like new things to say. I could wax about some stuff, but we're at pretty much at the end of time, the end of all time. The end of time for today. What I'm kind of most interested in is like, I'll put on my lab manager admin hat for a second and say, I think I know we're kind of these Friday meetings have been a bit like associated with Google Summer of Code, and that will be ending soon. But I would like to keep them just going in some form, and I know like Morgan's interested. I know Vrushali is particularly interested in the VR stuff, and Raj may be interested in that too. But like, I think I guess I'll put it this way: I've been kind of hoping for a critical mass to emerge for people interested in VR related stuff. So I don't know what we want to do going forward, but this is a space where if we develop some projects and ideas, or at least just have like a regular meeting about these topics, I think that would be fruitful. Because I know there's a lot of things in the lab that we haven't really been. There's been stuff kind of waiting in the wings for a long time to try to give space to talk about, and we're kind of getting a little bit at them in these discussions. So I'm just interested in them kind of maintaining after quote unquote the summer ends. So I don't know. I'm just kind of want to offer like some discussion about that, or see what people want to do going forward.
Actually, I am also interested in XR thing, like giving a little talk or writing a blog about awareness about VR, AR for people who are not into this field. I actually wrote a blog or whatever post on LinkedIn also, like I will be posting bunch of blog upcoming week, but I was busy in my exam, so left that idea. But like JC put on this thing, so we can do this in Slack, like our channel, and then also with the LinkedIn community to like people to reach our organization and know about us in more detail.
Yeah. Yeah, and like this is something that we could like. I think it would be a great way to also. One thing I'm sympathetic of is like I know it's in, it's quite late in like India and other parts more east of here in the United States. So I guess like I'm just thinking what does it look like? Because there's only a couple more weeks left of summer code stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I would definitely like to like really encourage let's please folks, if you have questions about anything or how to wrap stuff up or documentation or what you need to kind of get things settled, please use the Slack or message Bradley. I can help with some things too, or anyone else here. We do want to make sure. I don't want to overlook that. Like you guys need to do that and do that well. So I'm not trying to jump ahead. I'm just thinking after that, I would like there to be something that continues here, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if this is a good time for everybody. I don't know if we want to change the format or anything, but like I just want to kind of keep it rolling to some extent. If everybody else wants to do that, so something to keep in mind, and we can talk about that more next time too, I suppose.
Yeah. So this meeting time actually originated. It was a OpenWorm related meeting time for like open source, and I was leading it, and then it kind of transitioned into some all-purpose
And it was
time
like office hours.
Yeah, it was
and
office
then
hours. And then it transitioned into like an all-purpose thing for the lab, and then we did the open source because it's Google Summer of Code. I'd like to do that, and we could change the time a little bit too. But yeah, we should talk more about that.
I guess I'll make, because I could do a few, like I could make the old like Phasix channel. Well, I don't know if that was actually the old channel, but like I feel like I want to place in Slack to just discuss this. Like I put a message in Google Summer of Code now, but like there there's something to be done ahead of time too, or in the future, I should say.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at that. I don't need a major updates. Just think about this stuff and where I want to go.
Yeah, that would be great if we could plan that out. I mean, without Google Summer of Code, it's a little bit more. We have to plan a little bit more what we want to talk about in a meeting. So, I mean, people can come in and give their updates, but we also want to have like maybe some things we focus on too, because I think it's useful if you're going to get together to meet to have like an agenda where we kind of go over things as a group that are very specific to open source
Well, and that's kind of my initial thoughts on that. And again, open to who wants to be there, who wants to do stuff, and that's the thing too. Part of what's challenging about that in the administrative sense is, we kind of have these sort of semi-disparate. Not everybody wants to do Apple Vision Pro stuff necessarily. I'm interested in it, but we have these different things that are going on. People want to do specific applications, and I feel like it would be great to have something that kind of unifies it. It could be like, oh, we're like almost like I don't know if it'd be like a journal club around VR stuff. I don't know if there's quite the right word for it, but almost like a discussion space where there's either a topic or like a unified project that we're talking about. And I don't really know what that is. I don't know what we want to do in that sense. I have a little bit of experience with some of the like type of Quest headsets and some other like products that kind of fit the large things. But I don't know. Maybe something that we can just think about. I'm open to. I definitely agree with Bradley about that. Like, we should have something that has to be either like a group, an agenda, a topic, or like a project or something of that nature.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we have a lot of things to catch up. We do have a lot of stuff from like the agent-based world that we haven't like gone it. Like, it's kind of off to the side. Like, we have the Bradenburg vehicles things. We do have the agent-based modeling, which we talk about sometimes, but not like. So that's something that can be like kind of, well, we should highlight that so people know that that's something that we have done or want to do or whatever. Because, we'll have project, people are always interested in what projects we have. So having a place to go over those projects, whether they participate in them or not, but just know that they're there. Just raise awareness. I think that might be good. And, there's a lot to go over with the Bradenburg vehicles that we didn't touched. It's just kind of like they're there, they were worked on, and they're kind of sitting there, open source software, but, like, people haven't used them that much. So, like, we have a lot of stuff we make and then put away, and, and it's not that we put it away on purpose. It's just kind of like, can't do everything at once. So... All right. Anything else before we go?
Just anything. I know I missed some of the early parts of the meeting. Anything that like for Google Summer Code stuff we want to particularly hit for next week. I know there's like individual, wrapping things up, but anything specific outside of that we want to highlight.
Oh, like topically?
Or just like reminders for what to to do, like for Google specifically?
Oh, well, I think Raj and Vrushali both are on track. Like, there's like the putting together a submission. There's like finding the stopping point for the project. So, like, we know that we can't do everything for the summer. We need to say, this is where we stopped. We have put these things out there. There have to be some things that run or things you can show the Google people that you've done over the summer, and then have documentation for that. So I think both of you are on track for that. Just make sure that you think about this in terms of an endpoint. What is my endpoint for this project now? Not like you should think about like what you would do maybe for if you had another year to work on it. But for now, what's your stopping point? And then when you submit your when you make your submission, you have to make a submission link. So a lot of people have used Gist for that, and you'll just like create a little overview of your project with the files that people can run if they can download and run them. That would be great. If they you should at least tell them how to do that, and then next steps in the documentation. So we can actually go over that more in detail next week. I think that would be good.
Okay. Just wanted to check on that. That's all for me. I'll sign off and
All right.
see everybody next week.
All right. Everyone take care.